folks. So we're going to get started today, and in the interest of time, I'm going to try to pack as much into this 18 minutes as possible, because I'm talking about being efficient. I'm going to try to walk the talk as much as I possibly can. What that means is that although I want to answer everyone's questions, if you have questions, just be sure you see me afterward, and that way we can stay on a really nice flow, and I can give you as much information as possible, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about neuroscience and how to leverage what we know about the brain to do more faster. And neuroscience, all it really is the science of the nervous system of which your brain sits in control of. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we share a lot of similarities with each other. We share a lot of similarities with other species, but we are also very much individuals. So I'm going to focus on the individual nature of it first, and then a little bit more what we have in common with others. The first principle is to heed circadian rhythm. Now, this is just a typical example of the flux that we all have throughout the day. The circadian rhythm really is that we go through this 24 to 25-hour cycle every single day with things like blood pressure, heart rate, attention span, all of that kind of stuff. But the thing about it is that every person is a little bit different. And knowing how your circadian rhythm works is really going to give you an advantage in that particular way, because it all happens here in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus controls all of your basic drives, right? Hunger, thirst, sex, attention, focus, how sleepy you feel. And the hypothalamus is powerful. If you want to know how powerful the hypothalamus is, try thinking about a time when you met somebody who later died because they forgot a drink of water, right? You get thirsty, right? You don't ever die from that because the hypothalamus reminds you, hey, time to drink, basic drives. So it keeps you awake, it keeps you alert, it makes you sleepy, it makes you thirsty, it makes you hungry. The hypothalamus is important. But when we're starting to talk about attention, we have this thing we know of called a stream of consciousness. Consciousness goes kind of up and down. And if you think about it for yourself, most people know it kind of in common language as being, are you a morning person or are you an evening person? Now, if you're a morning person, raise your hand. You're with me. Morning folks. All right. Evening folks. Okay, about half and half. Now, morning folks, you're probably really good in the morning, but then come early afternoon, something terrible happens, doesn't it? You start to crash. And if you're an evening person, usually, on the flip side, mornings are rough for you. I mean, people don't understand how hard it is for you to get out of bed sometimes. So when we look at these patterns, I want you to think about a traditional work day. Does working 9 to 5 really fit? So if you're a morning person, like me, I'm totally a morning person, which is annoying to so many people. But if you're a morning person, you get up, you're ready to work. At 6 o'clock in the morning, you can do anything, right? By the time you get to work at 9 o'clock, they've missed a lot of your productivity. And then you have to settle in, and there's all this stuff. And about 10 o'clock, you really start your day. But then you only have a few hours before you're crashing. And if you're an evening person, that 9 to 5 schedule, it probably misses you almost entirely. So what do? You compensate, right? You drink that caffeine, 5-hour energy shots. You do everything you can to stay awake. And there's a reason why caffeinated beverages and caffeine is such a largely used drug in America, right? We need it to stay within this framework. But this is a framework that is made by employers, not one that really works with our body. So what does that say about efficiency? If you want to be efficient, rule number 1 is choose the time to do your hardest tasks and the time that you're most efficient. So do your hardest tasks if you're a morning person in the morning. Leave those afternoon hours for the times that you can just get anything done basically in your sleep. The same way with evening folks. If you can really make it work in the evening, make it work in the evening and save your hardest tasks for then. Now the second principle, I don't want to crush your dreams, but don't be a dreamer. And by that, what I mean is that there's a lot of misnomers going around with gurus that tell you to build these dream boards. Have you ever heard of that? Build a dream board. Put your nice new boat on it, put your lake house on it, and that's going to be awesome, isn't it? You look at that and you tell your friends, look, this is what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a Bentley, a lake house. I'm going to have this awesome life. And when you do that, what you do to the brain, which is kind of fascinating, is you give yourself neurological satisfaction, a sense of awe, a stroking. And because of that, you get neurological rewards for things you haven't earned, right? And it takes away your motivation. It saps it. So toss the dream board, because one of the things we know is that science says it's one thing to have positive expectation, it's another thing to have positive fantasies. Positive fantasies result in nothing. But positive expectations, that's expecting that it's going to take work. It's expecting that you're going to have to put forth effort. And if you do that, then the reward will come. You know, gurus say a lot of things because they're nice to hear, and no one wants to hear about the work, right? So this means you have to actually do the work and expect the work. And this is what the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology has to say, if we want to get all technical. Positive expectations predict high effort, successful performance. But the reverse is true for positive fantasies. Low effort, low success. So toss the dream board. Don't get stuck in that, because you'll end up staring at it and doing little else. So the third principle we're going to look at, focus. Don't flounder. But what do I mean by that? The hard truth is you think you can multitask, and you can't. Now, you can say that you do. We say a lot of things that are untrue about ourselves. You know, science shows we rate ourselves as more attractive than we are, smarter than we are, and we also think we can multitask, and we can't. One of the things that Harvard has shown us from recent studies is that the average person reduces efficiency by as much as 40% when having to reorient from a task. What this means is that once you are doing a task so diligently and you go off to Twitter, coming back, you're going to reduce your efficiency by 40%, because the average person will take 15 minutes to get to that place, that mental place they were at before they left. 15 minutes is a long time. Now again, we overestimate our abilities. So what we say in this is, if you want to have social network time, plan it out. But don't just keep skipping around, because you're affecting the efficiency of your work, and it's going to take you twice as long to get something done. But the exciting truth is, if you're working 24/7, you're working wrong. Again, a lot of gurus say, hustle, hustle all the time, on the weekends, on the evening, all the time you have to be doing this, right? You don't want to be working all the time. If you're working all the time, you're working wrong, you're not going to be efficient, and you're not going to be productive. Do you know who has the highest amount of work hours, citizen-wise, per month? Greece. Think about that. Of all of the EU, Greece has the highest amount of working hours per month. One of the lowest, the next to the lowest, is Germany. They have 30 days paid vacation, one of the highest vacation times, and they work almost less than any other European Union nation, but they are a powerhouse. And you know, for us, what that means as individuals is that you don't have to take a vacation all the time, and big long ones. But take weekends where you go to the beach. Make sure that you get out and you do things. Take walking meetings like Steve Jobs, you know, walk around the park. It fuels creativity, and it helps you be more productive at the end. So you want to separate the notion that working all the time is being productive. There was a recent study done where they looked at the most elite performers over the past century to look at their working patterns. And what they found is that these elite performers, whether it's in athletics, music, recently computer work, and what they found is that they worked in 90-minute uninterrupted blocks. So they had 90 minutes that they worked uninterrupted, and then what they did was they took a break. 90 minutes, then a break. And they worked on average 4.5 to 5 hours this way per day. They tended to be the most elite performers. So it's kind of an interesting study. The other thing we're going to look at is how stress can work for you. You know, chronic stress, you probably are very familiar with. Sadly, we kind of all are. And that's really the weight that sits on our shoulders and just never seems to go away. Whereas acute stress is something that comes and it's very intense, and then it goes away. Well, there's a big difference in how this affects your hippocampus. Your hippocampus is the area of the brain that controls memory. And what we know about chronic stress is that it affects your memory, your performance, your attention. And if you've ever had a loved one in the hospital, you know this, right? Chronic stress is terrible. But acute stress, what we found out recently, is that if you don't have that big shoulder of chronic stress on your back, acute stress makes you better. And actually, when they give business owners acute stress tasks, just randomly, and then they test their memory 2 weeks later, they find that new cells are actually growing in their hippocampus, and they perform better. So it's kind of cool. You make your memory better and your performance better by having acute stress periodically rather than chronic stress. So what it tells you is that procrastination is not just going to kill you at the time, it is going to affect everything you do from that point forward when you should have been doing that task. Every time you're thinking about it, it's taking away from you. Every time that it's kind of sitting on you, it's affecting you. So you want to really do things first, don't procrastinate, and manage your projects where you're getting those tasks out of the way. Now, the last thing we're going to look at, the fourth principle there, is kind of tuning up. A major factor that determines our ability, it says, to sustain and maintain peak cognitive performance has to do with the total amount of sleep that you manage to get, or total amount of sleep you manage to get over several days. If you follow me on Twitter at all, you know that I'm kind of like a fitness freak, and I'm really into working out and exercise and all those things. And part of that is because, you know, a lot of the research says that one of the things we can do with our brain, that even though we have all these tasks, like do crosswords, do this, it'll keep your brain sharp, research shows that the thing that keeps your brain the sharpest is working out and how you eat. But of the things that we can impart here in tuning up, a major factor is sleep. And when you want to know how detrimental sleep is, I thought I'd throw some things at you because I thought this was fascinating. If you look over a period of days, this is what really affects you. So if you're getting less than 4 hours, or 4 hours on average of sleep over a period of 4 days, so it's 4 hours of sleep every day for about 4 or 5 days, your ability to function cognitively is the same as legal drunkenness. Harvard. You know? So it's amazing, really, that's how you perform on tasks. Now, you're not stumbling, you're not like falling over, your balance isn't affected, but how you can cognitively perform is affected. So the other thing, though, that we realized, and this is the part that kind of fascinates me, is that sleep deprivation depletes glucose level in the prefrontal cortex. What does this mean? The prefrontal cortex makes all of the reasoning, judgment, and decision-making of the brain. And glucose is like the food of the brain. So what you do when you don't give that area that's so important the food it needs is you impair it. And what this means for both employers and people who work is that, let's say you're sitting here now and you run a business, right? If you make your employees work long, hard hours and it depletes that glucose level, not only are they angry, but it impairs their decision making. And a recent study by Christopher Barnes, who I cite up there, shows that your employees are more likely to steal from you, to make bad decisions, and to rip you off when they're tired. So you don't want to do that. So overworking them not only makes them angry, it makes them more likely to steal from you. Now, if it's just you, this is impairing your ability to make solid decisions. And in affiliate marketing, a lot of times, this is with significant sums of money. You don't want to be making bad decisions should that occur. So kind of in wrapping this up, when you start to look at some of the factors that we can do to stay on task and be efficient, some of it's taking care of ourselves, some of it's working within our biorhythms, a lot of it is ignoring advice that we've been told over and over and over again, and being able to really stay on track. And that's really the message that I want to impart here, is that a lot of times the things that you hear have real biological backing. And I hope I didn't just blaze through this too quickly for you, but hopefully I've given you some really solid advice today. If you have any questions at all, do we have time for that, sir, time manager? No? Yes? Okay, question? And I'm going to come with the mic because I asked them to let me use this mic because I like to walk around. I'm kind of filled with energy. Yeah.
I'm curious about adrenaline and adrenal depletion.
Good. Adrenal depletion. Do you want to say a little bit more about the question and what that's based in, or do you want me to just talk?
I know that long-term stress, running on adrenaline, you can deplete your adrenals, and once they're depleted, it's really hard to build them back up again. And I believe this is the basis of like post-traumatic.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot to be said for that. When we talk about chronic stress, one of the things that we're talking about is depleting the adrenal system. So we talk about long-term activation of what we call the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight system. And if that gets activated, which in chronic stress, it's meant to be, the activation of the sympathetic nervous system is meant to be so that, let's just say randomly, I run at this man with a microphone, right? Hopefully, all of a sudden, he's going to start getting this fight or flight response. His heart's going to start going up. He's going to be able to stand and fight. And because of that, he's going to release all of those things we talk about. Adrenaline, his heart rate's going to go up, his pupils are going to dilate, he's going to become like a little machine. But that's meant to be episodic, right, and short term. So when it happens over time, it starts to have all of these horrible effects on the body, right? Your heart rate, it can affect your heart long term. It affects your ability to think long term. And depleting those adrenal systems have other effects which they link to cancer and diseases and lots of different effects. So you want to not have chronic stress because your body just isn't meant to function that way. So when we're pushing our body to do those things, it's causing significant damage over time. So, yeah.
I just wanted some examples of chronic and acute stress because I associated procrastination with acute and then you said no. So.
Okay. Chronic stress, when we talk about chronic stress, I'm talking about something like procrastination that you put off and it's just always kind of present. Acute stress, it can't be too acute because that's going to cause problems. Like if you are, let's just say you're assaulted in an alley, right? That's really acute stress. That's not what we're talking about because that can cause post-traumatic stress disorder and all sorts of things. The kind of acute stress I'm talking about is that if you're managing a business well, and you don't have a ton of projects hanging over your head personally, but you kind of know their slots and who should be doing them and who should be working with them. Acute stress would be like all of a sudden a deadline's moved up that you have to deal with this week, right now, and you have to get it in. Or acute stress would be, you know, your business had this major thing happen with the bankroll or payroll or something like that, and you have to deal with that right now, this second. You have an employee who's really essential, who's very ill, and now you're going to have to figure out how to manage this big project for the week. I guess that's what I'm talking about. Those kinds of things, yeah. That's acute stress in the business world. So in the real world, when we talk about acute stress, they can be much more stressful and cause some symptoms. Other questions? Yes, sir. And then I think we're out of time soon.
Mine's more of a marketing question. Is there any studies related to what you've just said in terms of the day part, where, for example, let's say if you have a brick and mortar retail operation during the weekend, if you're a day person, you know, that may be great for businesses to promote during the day. With the web or the internet, you know, is there any studies or any research that's been done related to this and how the mind works and when people are in a good time slot to buy, not buy,
you know,
things like that?
That's a fantastic question because what we find is that it demographically shifts, right? I mean, that if we're looking at teenagers and how they function, it's going to be a little bit different than how adults function. But also the type of demographics or type of product that you're selling is going to determine that as well. So if you're looking at, I think the best marketing example I can give you which relates at least to the brain is looking at Axe products, Axe body products. I love their commercials. Have you seen them? But they're ridiculous, but I love them because what they do is they play on the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of the adolescent male brain. So you have this toiletry product, right? It's just Axe, A-X-E. Axe body products is a toiletry, and they've made it cool for teenage boys. And I have a time card right now, and I'll just finish it up real quick. So they have, what they've done is they got all of these things of the adolescent brain, right? So they have lapses in judgment and reasoning, but they also have impulsivity issues, and they're also very hormonal, right? So you get this young adolescent awkward boy, and then you say, if you use this product, you're going to get this hot supermodel, and she's going to be all over you. And even though to the adult that seems ridiculous, and we all look at that and say, oh my gosh, to the adolescent younger mind who has impulsivity, hormones raging, and all these other things, this is brilliant because even if he can't engage in it, he can engage in the fantasy, and a lot of times that's enough. So. You know, I would look at consumer behavior books. I think those are probably the best. Consumer behavior is a particular branch of psychology that looks at integration of psychology into why consumers buy, whether it's colors, color choices, time, all those types of things. So, thanks so much for your time, guys.